So if I look at my web page, I see some kind of defined sections, right? I see a section that we called line spacing and text formatting and text alignment. I see what could be discernible sections. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a class selector to kind of stylize these different sections. So I'm going to come back into my CSS file, and this time I'm going to add a class selector. And if you remember, a class selector starts in my CSS file with a period. And then I'm going to give my class selector a name. I'm going to call it section because, well, my web page is kind of broken up into sections. I'm going to change the background color of each one of those sections. I'm going to add a border to the sections so they kind of stand out. I'm going to add a padding and also a margin. So if you remember, the padding is the space around the inside from the content to the border, and the margin is the space around the outside between the section and the elements that are around it. Now this background color is going to be using a hexadecimal value when the background colors, the colors in H2 and my ID selector were just words. I'm going to use a hexadecimal value for this color. Either one of these will work if you want to be much more specific about what the color is. So if you remember, each one of the elements inside of here ends with a full colon. So now I'm going to come back into my web page, and we're going to see if we can add that class selector to my HTML file. So I'm going to add a division tag or a div tag for each one of these different sections. We have used the div tag before down here in the text alignment. So I'm going to come right above line spacing, and I'm going to add a div tag, and then I will go right below line spacing, and I am going to close the div tag. So we're going to use that div tag in order to kind of group all of the components of the line spacing together. And then I'm going to apply my class selector to this particular division. So inside of the opening tag, I'm going to use the keyword class equals, and then inside of the double quotes, I'm going to give the name of the selector that we created. And then I'm going to save my HTML file. I'm going to save my style sheet, and then I'm going to refresh my browser and see what happened. And now I can see that I have a division that is grouping everything in line spacing together, and it is using that class selector that I created in my style sheet to style what it looks like. I think the next thing that I'll do is, since I have a comment in here that says line spacing, I'm going to see if I can change that to a header 2. So I'm going to change the comments to a heading 2, and then I'm going to come into my style sheet and I'm going to create a new class selector for the heading 2 that comes within that section. So I'm going to call it .section H2 because it will be the heading 2 with inside of the section. I'm going to change its color to red and the text alignment to right. And then I'm going to save both of my HTML file and my style sheet. And when I refresh my browser, then I see that the entire section is red and right aligned. So if I come back to my class selector, I can see that I forgot to close that heading. So if I close it and then I refresh save my HTML file and I refresh my browser, there, that is much better. Now I do want you to notice here that I already have a selector for heading 2. So that was an element selector for heading 2. That means every single heading 2 would have that exact same values. And I am creating a very specific class selector for heading 2, which is going to override the general heading or the general element selector here. So the next section that I see here is text formatting. And so we're doing things like bolding and italicizing and underlining, updating the font colors and the font sizes and the font face. We can do all of this inside of a style sheet. So I am going to replace all of this text formatting, including the comment, with just one line. that says this paragraph is large, bold, italicized, and underlined. I'm going to surround it by the opening and the closing paragraph tags. Now, we've used paragraph tags quite frequently in this program to as a double space. And so I am going to remove those because anything that I add to a paragraph tab is automatically, any styling that I add to a paragraph tab is automatically going to update everything within a paragraph. So we're going to come back and we're going to remove all of our paragraph tags. I see that there are a few of them spaced throughout my program. We were using them as a convenient way to create a double space. So I will remove all of those that I find generally at the end of each of the sections. And then I am just going to create a CSS rule for that particular element selector. So I'll go inside of my style sheet, and down at the bottom, I'm going to create an element selector for the paragraph. And I'm going to update the font size, the weight, and the style. We want it bold, italicized, underlined. I'm going to update the color to blue and the font family to, we'll try Papyrus. Once I have done that, I'm going to save both my HTML file and my CSS file. And then I'm going to refresh my browser and see if we get a single paragraph that is large, bold, italicized, underlined. It's also blue, and the font is Papyrus. So I could do all of those things in a style sheet.